She counted every coin like it mattered, like her life depended on it. And the whole store watched, smirking, whispering, convinced she was just another desperate soul clinging to pennies. But when the envelope opened and the truth spilled out, the air itself seemed to stop, heavy with shame and the unbearable weight of what they'd assumed. After listening to the whole story, you will definitely share your opinion in the comments. So let's move towards the story. The fluorescent lights of the convenience store hummed like tired insects above her head, casting a sickly glow over the chipped linoleum and the rows of dusty snacks that hadn't moved in weeks. It was the kind of place that existed in the in-between, wedged between a laundromat that smelled of mildew and a bus stop where people waited with hollow eyes and coffee-stained coats. And there, behind the scratched plexiglass counter, sat Clara, her fingers moving with quiet precision over a small pile of coins she'd pulled from her lunch bag. Dimes, nickels, a few tarnished quarters, each one wiped clean before being placed into neat little stacks. She didn't look up when the first customer snorted. She didn't flinch when the cashier beside her, a man named Greg with a gold chain always peeking from under his collar, leaned over and said, "Seriously, Clara? You gonna count your food stamps next?" The laughter that followed was sharp, brittle, like glass cracking under pressure. But Clara kept counting. Her eyes stayed low, focused, her breath steady. She had learned long ago that silence was armor. That dignity wasn't in how you responded, but in how you refused to break. Outside, rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, drumming against the store's front windows like fingers tapping impatiently. The scent of wet pavement and fried food from the deli next door seeped in every time the door swung open. A woman in a soaked blazer rushed in, muttering about the weather, and glanced at Clara's hands. "You saving up for a bus ticket or something?" she asked, half joking, half judging. Clara didn't answer. She just kept sorting. Pennies in one pile, nickels in another, each stack growing with a quiet, stubborn rhythm. The woman rolled her eyes and walked away, muttering something about people who can't afford to eat out but still waste time on lunch breaks. Greg leaned against the register, arms crossed. "You know, most people just spend their lunch break scrolling or eating, not playing bank teller with pocket lint." He chuckled, nudging the guy in the delivery uniform who was refilling the soda machine. "Right, Mark? What's she gonna do? Buy a mansion with all that?" Mark grinned, not unkindly, but caught in the current of the moment, and shrugged. "Maybe she's got a kid's piggy bank at home she's trying to fill." More laughter. Lighter this time, but still edged with something colder, something that wasn't really about the coins at all. It was about power, about the unspoken hierarchy of who deserves respect and who doesn't. And in that fluorescent-lit box of a store, Clara, with her faded sweater and quiet ways, had been quietly placed at the bottom. But what they didn't see, what none of them saw, was the envelope tucked deep inside her bag, worn at the corners from being opened and closed so many times. They didn't see the photograph tucked beneath the bills. A little girl with wide eyes and a gap-toothed smile, standing in front of a trailer with peeling paint and a roof that sagged in the middle. They didn't know that every coin Clara counted wasn't for herself, but for them, the Miller family, who lived 3 blocks away in a home that had no heat last winter, whose water had been shut off twice in the past 6 months, whose daughter, Lily, had come into the store once with shoes 2 sizes too big, held together with duct tape. Clara had seen her, had watched her count out exact change for a granola bar, her fingers trembling. And that night, Clara had gone home, emptied her own savings jar and made a decision. For 17 weeks, she had saved every single coin she earned in tips, every spare penny from her own meals, every nickel she found on the sidewalk. She skipped coffee, ate rice and beans, wore the same coat all winter, and every Friday, without fail, she added the coins to the envelope, now fat with folded bills, cash she'd saved from side jobs, from selling old books, from walking dogs in the freezing dark. The envelope wasn't just money. It was a promise, a down payment on a furnace, a chance for the Millers to stay in their home through another winter. And today was the day. The social worker had called that morning. The eviction notice had been served. If the rent wasn't paid by Monday, they'd be out. Clara finished counting the last of the coins, $4.87, and placed them gently into the envelope. Her hands didn't shake. Her breath didn't catch. But inside something trembled. Not fear. Not pride. Just the quiet, unbearable weight of love disguised as sacrifice. She stood, tucked the envelope into her coat, and walked toward the break room to pack up. That's when Greg, still smirking, stepped in front of her. "Hey, careful with that," he said, nodding at the envelope. "Wouldn't want to lose your life savings in the trash." The others chuckled. Even Mark looked away, suddenly interested in the soda machine. Clara stopped. For the first time that day, she looked up. Her eyes weren't angry. They weren't sad. They were clear, deep, like still water reflecting something far older than pain. And then, slowly, deliberately, she opened the envelope and let the contents slide into her palm. Not coins, not food stamps, bundles of cash, hundreds of dollars, neatly banded, mixed with the very coins they'd mocked. The room went silent. The hum of the lights seemed louder now. Greg's smile died. Mark took a step back. The woman in the blazer, still near the register, froze mid-sip of her coffee. "I've been saving," Clara said, her voice soft but carrying like a bell in the sudden quiet. "Not for me. For the Millers. The family in the blue trailer near the railroad tracks. Their little girl comes in sometimes. Wears shoes that don't fit." She paused, letting the words settle. "They're about to lose their home. This," she said, holding up the envelope, "is going to help keep them warm this winter." No one spoke. No one moved. The rain outside slowed to a whisper, and in that silence, something cracked. Not in Clara, but in all of them. The weight of their laughter, their assumptions, their careless cruelty, now pooled in the space between them, thick and undeniable. The silence in the break room stretched like a held breath, fragile and trembling. Greg's mouth opened slightly as if to say something. Maybe an excuse, maybe a joke to break the tension. But no sound came. His fingers, which had moments ago been drumming confidently on the counter, now hung limp at his sides. Mark stared at the envelope in Clara's hand like it was something holy, something he had no right to look at. The woman in the blazer slowly set her coffee down, the plastic cup making a soft click against the laminate table. Even the manager, who had just stepped out of his office to check on the sudden quiet, froze mid-step, his eyes flicking from Clara's face to the thick wad of cash she held with such quiet dignity. Clara didn't wait for a response. She didn't need one. Gently, she tucked the envelope back into her coat pocket, smoothed the front of her sweater, and walked past them all, her boots quiet against the floor. The door chimed as she stepped outside into the damp afternoon, the rain now a soft mist clinging to her hair and shoulders. She didn't look back. She didn't wave. She just walked, steady, purposeful, down the cracked sidewalk, past the bus stop, past the flickering streetlight, toward the edge of town where the houses grew smaller and the yards wilder. Inside the store, the silence cracked like old ice. "She's helping them?" Mark finally whispered, more to himself than anyone. Greg swallowed hard, his throat working like he'd just tasted something bitter. She never says anything. She just works." There was no defensiveness in his voice now, only the raw scrape of regret. The woman in the blazer wiped her hand across her mouth, as if trying to erase the words she'd spoken earlier. "I told her she should just get a better job," she murmured. Like she wasn't trying hard enough. The manager rubbed his temples, then looked at the clock. "She's been here 3 years, he said quietly. Never called in sick. Never complained. I didn't even know she was doing this. No one had. That was the worst of it. They'd seen her sitting there every week, counting coins, and assumed poverty. Assumed shame. Assumed she was clinging to pennies because she had no choice. But the truth was far more complicated and far more beautiful. Clara wasn't poor in spirit. She was rich in a way none of them had considered. Rich in compassion, in quiet determination, in the kind of love that doesn't announce itself with fanfare, but shows up in dimes and dollars and frozen mornings when she walked an extra mile to drop off groceries on the Miller's porch. The house Clara approached wasn't much to look at. The blue paint had long since faded to gray, peeling in strips like sunburnt skin. The front steps sagged, and one of the windows was covered with a piece of cardboard held in place by duct tape. But there was a small flower pot on the railing, cracked, but filled with bright yellow daisies, blooming defiantly in the cold. Clara paused there, took a breath, and knocked. The door opened slowly, revealing a woman with tired eyes and hair pulled back in a messy bun. Mrs. Miller. Her face lit up slightly when she saw Clara. "You didn't have to come today," she said, voice hoarse. "We'll figure something out. We always do." Clara smiled, small but real. "I know you would," she said. "But today you don't have to." She reached into her coat and pulled out the envelope. Mrs. Miller's hands trembled as she took it. She didn't open it right away, just held it, pressed against her chest, like it was a letter from someone she thought she'd never hear from again. "Why?" she finally asked, tears welling. "Why are you doing this?" Clara looked past her, into the dim living room where a little girl sat on the floor, coloring with broken crayons. Lily looked up, grinned, and waved. Clara waved back. "Because I remember what it feels like," she said softly, "to be that close to losing everything, to feel invisible, to hear people whisper about you like you're not even there." She paused. "No one helped me when I needed it. I don't want Lily to learn that lesson too." Mrs. Miller didn't speak. She just stepped forward and pulled Clara into a hug, tight, desperate, full of a gratitude too deep for words. Clara didn't resist. For the first time all day, her shoulders dropped. Her breath came easier. She let herself be held, just for a moment, by someone who finally saw her. Not as the quiet cashier, not as the coin counter, but as someone who had chosen kindness when it cost her something. Back at the store, the mood had shifted. Greg stood at the counter, staring at the spot where Clara had sat. He picked up a dime she'd left behind, a stray coin that had rolled under the register. He turned it over in his fingers, watching how the light caught the edge. Mark leaned against the soda machine, arms crossed, but his usual smirk was gone. "I saw that little girl once," he said quietly. "She came in with her mom, bought a juice box, looked at the candy like she wanted to ask, but didn't." He shook his head. "I gave her a lollipop, just one. Felt good at the time. But now it feels like nothing." The manager walked over, cleared his throat. "I'm raising her pay," he said, "effective Monday, and I'm starting a fund for families in the neighborhood. We'll collect donations, food, clothes, money. I'll match it." He looked at Greg. "You in?" Greg nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I'm in." He didn't say it to impress anyone. He said it because for the first time in a long time, he felt the weight of his own choices, and the chance, however small, to make one that mattered. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds parted just enough to let a sliver of sunlight through, catching the edge of Clara's coat as she walked home. She didn't hurry. She didn't look down. She carried herself like someone who had already won, because she had, not against anyone else, but against the silence, the shame, the fear of being seen and misunderstood. She had chosen to keep going, to keep giving, to keep believing that small things, coins, kindness, quiet acts of courage, could change the world one heart at a time. The sun dipped low behind the row of aging apartment buildings, painting the sky in soft streaks of amber and lavender, as if the world itself was holding its breath in reverence. Clara walked slowly now, her steps lighter, though her body ached from the long shift and the weight of the day. The city around her began to stir with evening life, children calling to one another from porches, the distant hum of a radio playing an old soul song, the clink of dishes from open kitchen windows. It was a quiet kind of beauty, the kind that only reveals itself to those who pay attention. She turned down her street, a narrow lane lined with maple trees whose branches stretched overhead like arched cathedral rafters. Her building was modest, 3 stories, brick, with a flickering porch light and a chipped number 7 nailed crookedly by the door. She climbed the steps, keys in hand, and paused before unlocking it. From inside, faint music played, piano, slow and tender. She smiled. Her younger brother, Daniel, was home. Daniel had been just 12 when their mother passed, 6 years ago now, and Clara had become both sister and parent overnight. She'd dropped out of community college, taken the overnight shift at the hospital cafeteria, then moved to the convenience store when it offered better hours. She'd never complained. Not once. But Daniel had seen it. The way she'd come home with shadows under her eyes, how she'd count bills at the kitchen table late at night, how she'd eat half her sandwich and say she wasn't hungry. He'd wanted to help, but she wouldn't let him. "You focus on school," she'd say. "That's how we win." Now, at 18, Daniel was weeks away from leaving for college, a scholarship to study social work, of all things. He wanted to help people, he said, because someone had helped them when no one else would. He never said her name, but they both knew. Inside, the apartment was warm, the scent of garlic and thyme lingering from dinner. Daniel stood in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, his hair messy, a pencil tucked behind his ear. "You're late," he said without turning. "I was about to send out a search party." Clara hung her coat on the rack. "I had a stop to make." He glanced at her, then paused. Something in her face, peaceful but deep with emotion, made him set the spoon down. "Everything okay?" She nodded. "Better than okay." She walked over, leaned against the counter, and pulled the envelope from her coat. Empty now, just the worn edges and a few stray coins at the bottom. She handed it to him. Daniel turned it over in his hands. "This is the Miller Fund, isn't it?" She nodded. "All of it. Rent's paid. They're safe for now." He looked at her, eyes glistening. "You've been doing this for months. You didn't even tell me." "I didn't want you to worry," she said, "or feel like you had to give up anything." Daniel let out a breath, half laugh, half sob. "You think I wouldn't want to know? That I wouldn't want to be part of this?" He stepped forward and pulled her into a hug, squeezing her tight. "You're the strongest person I know. You always have been." Clara closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the moment sink in. Not the heat of the kitchen, but the deeper kind, the kind that comes from being truly seen. From being loved not despite your sacrifices, but because of them. Later that night, after soup and stories and a game of chess that Daniel let her win, Clara sat by the window with a cup of tea. The city glittered below, tiny lights like scattered stars. Her phone buzzed just once. A message from the store manager. "Everyone's asking about you. Greg left an envelope on your register. Said it was back pay for being a decent human being. Mark donated his entire tip jar. We're calling it the Clara Fund. Hope you don't mind." She didn't mind. She set the phone down and looked out at the night. Somewhere out there, in a blue trailer with daisies on the porch, a little girl was sleeping soundly, warm beneath a thick blanket. A mother was breathing easier. A family was still together. And none of it had made the news. None of it would go viral. There would be no applause, no spotlight, no grand recognition. But that was never the point. The point was the choice, the daily, quiet decision to do good even when no one is watching, even when they laugh, even when the world assumes the worst of you. The point was that kindness doesn't need permission. It doesn't require wealth or praise or validation. It only asks that you see someone, truly see them, and then choose to stand with them in whatever way you can. Clara sipped her tea, the steam warming her face. Outside, a single leaf broke free from the maple tree and spiraled down, slow and graceful, landing softly on the sidewalk. And in that moment, the world felt not smaller, but fuller. Not broken beyond repair, but healing one coin, one act, one heart at a time. The following Monday morning, the convenience store buzzed with a different kind of energy. One not sparked by gossip or idle chatter, but by something quieter, heavier, and far more enduring, reflection. The usual rhythm of scanners beeping and coffee brewing was underlaid with hushed conversations, glances exchanged across aisles, and a strange new reverence for the space behind the register where Clara usually stood. She hadn't come in yet, and her absence loomed larger than her presence ever had. Greg arrived early, his gold chain tucked beneath his shirt, his smirk replaced by a furrowed brow. He walked straight to the counter, placed a brown paper bag on Clara's usual spot, and taped a note to the front, for the Clara Fund. First of many. Inside were $50 in crisp bills and a folded letter, handwritten, ink smudged in places, as if written late at night after too much thinking. I judged you, it read. Not just once. A lot. And I didn't even know your name until last week. I'm sorry. I want to do better. Mark came in next, not in his delivery uniform, but in plain clothes, carrying a box filled with canned goods, blankets, and children's books. He set it down gently near the front door, where a small table had appeared overnight, topped with a handmade sign that read, "For families in need. All are welcome." The manager, Mr. Ellery, had set it up before sunrise. No fanfare, no announcement, just action. By midday, the table was overflowing. Neighbors stopped by, not just regulars, but people from down the block, mothers with strollers, elderly men from the senior center, even a group of high school students who had heard the story from a cousin who worked part-time at the store. One girl, no older than 16, placed a small jar on the table labeled "My lunch money," for Lily. She didn't say a word, just smiled shyly and walked away. And then, just before closing, Mrs. Miller arrived. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, as if afraid to cross the threshold. She wore a clean coat, her hair neatly brushed, and beside her, Lily bounced on her toes, her feet now in proper shoes, bright pink with Velcro straps. In her hand, she held a drawing. A house with a red door, a sun in the corner, and 3 figures holding hands beneath it. Above them, in crooked letters, she had written, "Thank you, Clara." Mr. Ellery approached, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "You don't have to explain. We know." Mrs. Miller shook her head, tears spilling over. "I do," she whispered. "I need to." She looked around at Greg, who had turned away to wipe his eyes, at Mark, who gave her a small nod, at the table weighed down with generosity. We were 2 days from the shelter. I didn't know how I'd tell Lily we were leaving, that we couldn't stay in the only home she'd ever known. Her voice cracked, and then Clara walked in with that envelope, like an angel who forgot to grow wings. No one spoke. The store was silent except for the hum of the cooler and the faint sound of Lily coloring on a napkin at the counter. Later, after they'd left and the lights were dimmed for closing, Mr. Ellery gathered the team. "This fund," he said, holding up the growing stack of donations, "isn't just about money. It's about seeing people, really seeing them. Clara taught us that, not with speeches, not with anger, just by being who she is." He looked at Greg. "We all carry assumptions. They're easy, comfortable, but they're also dangerous, because behind every quiet person, every withdrawn smile, every hand counting coins in a lunch break, there might be a story we're not brave enough to imagine." Greg nodded slowly. "I thought she was embarrassed," he admitted. "I thought she was ashamed of being poor, but she wasn't ashamed of anything. We were." The words hung in the air, true and heavy. That evening, Clara sat on her fire escape with Daniel, wrapped in a blanket, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. He handed her a mug of cocoa, topped with a single marshmallow. "You changed things," he said simply. She stirred the cocoa, watching the marshmallow melt. "I didn't do it alone." "No," he agreed, "but you started it." Below, a man in a worn jacket walked past, paused, and picked up a dime from the sidewalk. He looked at it, then dropped it into a small donation jar someone had placed on the corner, next to a sign that read, "Change begins here." Clara smiled, just slightly, not because she had been proven right, not because she had been vindicated, but because she had believed in something invisible, and now it was real. Not perfect, not fixed, but alive, growing. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of the world, other Claras were counting their coins, making their silent choices, loving in secret, waiting, hoping, giving, not because they expected praise, but because they knew, deep in their bones, that kindness is never wasted. It only waits for the moment it's needed most. The seasons turned. Winter gave way to a spring so gentle it felt like forgiveness. The daisies on the Miller's porch bloomed again, brighter this time, and Lily started school in a new backpack, her laughter echoing down the sidewalk each morning. The Clara Fund, once just a hopeful idea scribbled on scrap paper, had grown into something steady, a quiet force in the neighborhood, helping families with rent, medical bills, groceries, and even school supplies. Mr. Ellery kept it running with help from volunteers, including Greg, who now arrived early every Friday to sort donations, his gold chain long gone, replaced by a simple wristband that read "Listen First." Clara still worked at the store, still wore her faded sweater, still counted her tips at lunch, not because she needed to, not anymore, but because the ritual reminded her of why she started. And every few weeks, she'd pull out a fresh envelope, fill it quietly, and deliver it to someone who, like the Millers, was one step from breaking. But something had shifted, not in her, but in the way people saw her. Not as the quiet one, not as the odd girl who counted coins, but as someone who had carried a light through the dark without ever asking for credit. Parents pointed her out to their children not with pity, but with respect. "That's Clara," they'd say. "She helped keep a family together." And in those words something powerful took root. Hope, not as a grand idea, but as a practice. A habit. A choice made again and again. One rainy afternoon, nearly a year after it all began, a young woman came into the store, hesitant, eyes down. She wore a thin jacket, her hair pulled back in a frayed elastic. She bought a granola bar and a bottle of water, then sat on the bench outside, counting change in her palm. Clara watched her from behind the counter, not with judgment, not with pity, with recognition. She packed a small bag, soup, fruit, a thermos of tea, and walked out, setting it beside the woman without a word. The woman looked up, startled. I can pay," she stammered. Clara shook her head. "Not today, but maybe tomorrow you can do the same for someone else." The woman blinked, tears welling. "Why are you doing this?" Clara smiled, soft, knowing. "Because someone once assumed the worst about me, but another person chose to believe in me instead. That small act kept me going. I'm just passing it forward." She didn't wait for thanks. She walked back inside, her boots damp, her heart full. Later that night, as she stood by her window watching the rain trace silver lines down the glass, her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "I told my social work class about you today." One girl cried. The professor said it was the most real thing he'd heard all semester. "I told them your name." Clara set the phone down, pressed her palm to the cool glass, and exhaled slowly. The city stretched before her, vast and imperfect, humming with unseen struggles and quiet victories. And in that moment, she understood something she had always felt but never put into words. Courage doesn't always roar. Kindness doesn't always shine. And the people who change the world are often the ones who slip through it unnoticed, carrying envelopes of coins, wearing worn coats, loving without fanfare. We walk past them every day. We judge them before we know their names. We assume their silence means weakness, their frugality means lack, their humility means defeat. But sometimes, often, if we're brave enough to look, the quietest among us are the ones holding the world together, one small act at a time. And the truth is, we never know what battle someone is fighting. We never know what love they're carrying in a worn envelope. We never know whose winter they're trying to warm. So the next time you see someone counting coins, don't laugh. Don't assume. Don't turn away. Because the smallest gesture you dismiss today might be the very thing holding someone's life together tomorrow. And sometimes, just sometimes, kindness doesn't begin with a grand speech. It begins with a single coin, placed gently into someone's hand, with no expectation, and all the love in the world.